Jets and Avs fans, welcome to tonight's special crossover episode between Locked On Colorado Avalanche and Locked On Winnipeg Jets. I am joined by Kyle Sullivan from the Locked On Avs show, one of the co-hosts of a great program. Be sure to give them a follow. They cover the Avs closely, and so if you want the Denver Rocky High perspective, be sure to give them a listen. Of course, though, we're going to be running through a number of topics like you heard earlier. We've got big storylines, we've got some of the top players, and we've got some major X factors heading into what many predict to be one of the tightest run and closest playoff series, and maybe even one of the most exciting of the entire playoffs. Of course, just had to be round one, because what else would you expect from the NHL? Kyle, tell us a little bit about some of the biggest storylines that you think are really necessary for Jets and maybe even some Avs fans to think about before the playoffs kick off on Sunday.
It's one of those things, and again, Harrison, it's an honor to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited for this series because the Avalanche this year, it's one of those quiet things with all the storylines going on in the NHL, the franchise records, and the records that Nathan McKinnon was chasing at one point with the point streak at home with Wayne Gretzky, and what Cale Makar is tallying in franchise records for the Colorado Avalanche, which is a prestigious history, by the way, with Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg. And they are casually taking these records and owning them. And it came to culmination this season. So going into the playoffs, yes, it's been a little bit of I know you can look at the record and everything that's gone on for the Avs, and you can potentially see where this Avs team could be. It's a little bit of a disappointment not to win the Central, or you have a little bit of a better season than anticipated. So me and my co-host Chris Maselli, we have talked about flipping that switch when it comes to the playoffs, and you hope this high-powered offense that the Colorado Avalanche have can do that in the playoffs, and that's something that we're looking forward to, number one.
Perfect. And kind of touching on the expectations for the season, I think looking at this team as a former champion relatively recently, coming into this year, what did Avs fans think of this team, and have those expectations been met, or has it kind of been a little bit more modest?
All right, we're gonna plug in the PlayStation or the Xbox here, and we're gonna have a fantasy draft. So what if I told you I had a team of Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Artturi Lehkonen, Jonathan Drouin, Ryan Johansson, Tomas Tatar, Ross Colton, Miles Wood, and you'd have Cale Makar and Devon Toews at the backstop. I mean, you would feel pretty good about your chances. Well, fast forward to now, Ryan Johansson and Tomas Tatar are no longer a part of this team. Jonathan Drouin pulled up kind of limp at the end of game 82, so we'll see what that looks like going into the playoffs. But this was a fantasy roster, and you felt fired up for what this team could do. And they started off the season relatively hot, and then got cooled off, and really cooled off after the All-Star break. And then with some trades that were made at the deadline, the acquisitions of Casey Middlestead and some depth pieces, the Avs started looking good again, and then cooled off again. A roller coaster season made it impossible for you to get a firm grasp on what this 23-24 team looks like and what you could anticipate for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think Jets fans actually know a lot about that. We had last year, let's just call it the January collapse, that'll live in the minds of Jets fans forever. Bones had a great start to his Jets tenure, and then by the end of the season, he was publicly calling out players in a very surprising press conference. And, well, sounds like the locker room didn't take that well. I hope that has not happened for the Avs recently.
There were comments made of you players that go out there and think they know what they're doing, and they don't. And you have those little locker room comments from locker room leaders calling out members of the team, and then the team go through the trade deadline, and players come in, players go out. Ryan Johansson still has not played for after his trade. So it's interesting to see, and it's one of those that you'll be looking for the 30 for 30 on the story of the season, what really went on in that locker room, because there were some call outs and some challenges, and this team has to get to playing at some point. So yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, I think somebody is preparing a cage match with Lehkonen's dad. I think it was Lehkonen.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it was his dad that was apparently saying some controversial stuff on social media and Finland news. But of course, Jets fans are not exactly immune to that. We're pretty used to locker room drama ourselves. Thankfully, this year I think it's kind of gone away from that. And heading into this playoffs, I would say it sounds like the vibes are kind of okay with the Avs, maybe a little bit waning. I think for the Jets, we were kind of in that that same box a few weeks ago. 6-game losing streak, things felt pretty grim. And then all of a sudden, the Jets make a couple of line changes, and they're back to winning 8 straight. So things feel pretty good. I'll say that this season, it's been an interesting thing. But I don't know if you've caught any of the Jets games. Did you have any thoughts from what you've seen of them so far?
Well, see, I'll tip the cap where it's due. The Winnipeg Jets have swept the season series with the Colorado Avalanche, and the last meeting against the Colorado Avalanche, you hung a touchdown on the Colorado Avalanche. And it's one of those that the season was locked up. You basically had an idea on where everything was going to fall. And it's what we call preseason for the postseason. And you have the chance to really get a fine tune on what you're going to look like in the playoffs. And you absolutely look lifeless. Went through 2 goalies in a lifeless display. It's not really something you could hold as a positive going into this series, possibly facing the Jets for 7 games. How do you feel optimistic? Especially, honestly, I'll just hide the jersey for a second. Connor Hellebuyck is one of the most incredible goalies in the league right now, and gets kind of overshadowed by Vasilevsky because of the hardware and all the hot goalies for the minute. But Connor Hellebuyck is incredible, and I absolutely love his game. And for the Avalanche and their goalie situation, facing a solid goalie in Connor Hellebuyck, it's a tall task to look at, especially on the Colorado Avalanche side.
And I think the other concern is, even if you were to get to Hellebuyck, then you run into Brossoit. And, everyone kind of looked at the Bruins last year with Ullmark and Swayman as the model for, how you build a goaltending tandem. Jets do it a little differently, but I would say, it's been pretty good this year. And I think, what really fascinated me with the last game against the Avs, Colorado, always one of those teams that has generally torched us. The amount of rush chances and counters that you guys create against the Jets tends to be, let's just say, a little bit of a fun experience. If you were a Winnipeg fan a few years ago and you watched the team and how they used to defend, Colorado basically considered us a welcome mat. So seeing, the Jets and Avs both likely to play a pretty close series. I think any Avs fans that are thinking, oh, the Jets are going to run over us or whatever in the first couple of games, I'm not expecting that. I think that was probably more of a freak occurrence, maybe something to kind of wake the team up a little bit. But, from the Jets' perspective, I don't want to say that we're just happy to be here, but I think, expectations are modest, right? People have been down this road with the Jets team before. 17-18 was the real team that really felt like it was a cup winner. I know I had probably penciled, a sketch somewhere of the Jets and all of their players on the Stanley Cup itself. And then, of course, Washington won that year. Thank you, Marc-Andre Fleury. That was great. I think I'm still not quite over that. I love him, but I'm still not quite over that. But this year, I think folks are feeling pretty good about the team. And I think there's an, I would say, cautious optimism. The Jets are selling the stadium out again, and they hadn't done that for a while. So I don't know what it's like with Colorado fans. Are they feeling at least a little bit more confident? I know that this has been a bit of a rocky series, but what's the general sentiment heading into the series?
And see, that's the thing. That's the conundrum that the Avalanche fans sit at right now. You look at the history, the body of work against the Jets so far this year. It's not that great. It's not wonderful. But when you head to Ball Arena and you're handed the roster for the night, how can you not feel positive about what this Avalanche team could be? And you mentioned this playoff series. This is the same opponent for at least, at most 7 games, at least 4. So you can game plan. You know what works tonight. Try something the next game. You get to play around with it, and you get to really go to war against this team for a series. And I feel like it's something the Avs fans can be optimistic with when you see this roster and this lineup. If the Avalanche defense can not be so offensive minded in this series, because that's where the upper hand goes to Winnipeg. They're a defensive minded team. If they could just scale back a little bit and go punch for punch defensively, I feel like it's going to be a much tighter series than everybody's anticipating.
And it's funny you mentioned key players because in just a little bit, I actually want to talk about 3 or so key players from each team. Obviously, there's some guys in net for the Avs who might be key players in the wrong way, but that's not where Colorado makes its bread and butter. It is definitely up front, and holy mackerel, am I not looking forward to watching more playoff Nathan McKinnon. But before we dive into all of that, we did want to shout out our friends and partners at Policygenius. As somebody who makes very poor life decisions sometimes, I have gotten hurt at concerts, and we all know that, once in a while, maybe you need to go through the medical process. Maybe you need some health insurance. In the worst case scenario, you want to be prepared, though, for life insurance. And that's why Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. They know that you can't always prepare for everything, and they want to give you a great time-saving, money-saving option to help you and your family plan for your family financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Like me, I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking about the future and trying to plan ahead, and that's why Policygenius is here to help. They're offering you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team, and they want to help you with a team and a great cast of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Welcome back, friends. We are joined by our friends at the Locked On Colorado Avalanche podcast, Kyle Sullivan. My name's Harrison, for those of you who are on the Av side. I cover the Jets, and we are diving into, obviously, what's going to be a very tumultuous, very chaotic, and for at least one of us, a heartbreaking playoff series. Kyle, we were talking just a little bit ago about some key players and stuff, more referencing them, but I think we all know that there's at least one big name that Colorado fans would probably take a bullet for. And I'm of course talking about Valeri Nichushkin. No. There's
Hey, certain camps there, you are correct.
There's probably at least one group of fans that would. But Nathan McKinnon, man, he is having a season to remember. Potential Hart Trophy winner. What do you make of him, and what do you think his role? I mean, there's going to be an obvious role in this playoffs, but what do you think he's going to do against this Jets team?
And see, that's the wonderful thing here. This is where Nathan McKinnon shines. And we talked, me and my co-host Chris Maselli, we have talked about this all year. Nathan McKinnon is doing all this in this race against Kucherov all year long, scoring points in bunches a night. And it feels like Nathan McKinnon has another gear, and it feels like he's saving it for the playoffs. And we talked about the cup run in the first segment for the Avalanche. The captain, Gabe Landeskog, has not played a NHL game since that cup run. And there is no captain on this Colorado Avalanche team. But honestly, it's Nathan McKinnon right now. Everyone listens to Nathan McKinnon. He leads by example. And for better or worse, he kind of outscores the problems that the Avalanche have all year long. So you expect him to hit another level. And it's one of those that if he stalls out of the gate, it's one of those causes for concern. And he knows that as well.
And, with him potentially, say he somehow gets shut down by, of all people, Neil Pionk. I joke, but Neil Pionk, every year, I don't know what it is, he struggles with almost every game, but then he seemingly singles out one superstar player, and he's like, that's my guy. And, like, last year or in the bubble season, it was like Connor McDavid. I don't know why, but it just seemed like every shift, Pionk was like a missile. He just charged him. So, I mean, there's no real way to shut these guys down, but assuming they slow down, one name that I've always really loved watching, and somebody who I really feel like never gets very much credit, is Mikko Rantanen. He's one of the truly elite playmakers. At times, he's been Colorado's best player when McKinnon has maybe slowed down a bit. What kind of performance do you think we're going to see from him? A guy who's just a perennial, absolute workhorse of offense.
Yeah, he is. It's the Batman and Robin scenario. They often throw Cale Makar there, but it's Mikko Rantanen. He's huge. They call him the Big Moose for a reason. He could score. He has a deadly snapshot. He has a crazy backhander. He can get physical when he needs to. And the thing that you don't track on the score sheet, he's always like one of the first guys to touch the puck on the forecheck. He pressures, he's getting the puck in the corners, he's doing the extra work. And Nathan McKinnon and Mikko have been playing for so long that they know where the other is at all times. And it's a two-headed monster. They used to be the three-headed monster with Landeskog. That unit, they all knew the positions on the ice at all times. And Mikko he's just as like he's got all the intangibles of Nathan McKinnon, just on a little bit of a smaller scale because Nathan McKinnon is a hockey robot. Mikko just gets out there for the love of the game.
Yeah, see, Rantanen made the mistake of having one pasta noodle. That was basically the end.
That's
McKinnon's like, no carbs.
Bag
so
skates.
Yeah, that means one pasta noodle means 3 more workouts. But
that's right.
You guys have your big superstars. What is one player that maybe you feel has a super pivotal role in this playoffs, but maybe has gone very under the radar?
That's a wonderful question because coming into the season, you heard the name at the trade deadline, and that's about it. Casey Mittelstadt. For the season he was having in Buffalo, you anticipated a lot of that coming into Colorado. The ever vapid 2C position, it's almost like the drummer for Spinal Tap. You kind of just disappear once you become the 2C in Colorado, other than Nazem Kadri, but you want to see Casey Mittelstadt take that step up and take that level of ownership to that position and really carry the next wave of Avalanche offense in the playoffs. And it starts and ends with Casey Mittelstadt.
Yeah, I think the Jets have kind of struggled with a similar question. You've seen our center depth is technically good on paper, but I think a lot of people look at it and they're like, you don't exactly have a Nathan McKinnon. You might have somebody who's kind of in the Rantanen tier, but even then, that guy, which is Nick Ehlers, doesn't actually get that much ice time. So in a lot of ways, the Jets have kind of had to do it, I would say more piecemeal, right? More by committee. And that's where I think the Jets have maybe done well to adopt that more defensive strategy. I think that's been a big play for them. But, kind of on the other side for the Jets, the closest thing we have to Nathan McKinnon is really Mark Scheifele. And he's an interesting guy. I've seen him dominate shifts. I've seen him be a game-breaking presence, and there was a reason that years ago he was part of that magical Team North America. But I think a lot of times people overlook him because he just doesn't backcheck, or at least he didn't at one point. I always knew that it was one of the situations where he could. He just chose not to because he wasn't happy with stuff. Seems like he's more settled now. He's on a line that I can't say I love. Connor, as much as I love Kyle Connor, he's a fun player. He and Scheifele are kind of like oil and water. It's not a great mix. They may score some goals together, but in terms of some of the other work, you've seen Colorado and other teams sort of hem them in. That is, for me, at least one of the many concerns that I have playing a team that is as skilled and as good at passing as the Avs are. I think that is, let's just say it's not my favorite matchup. But
and you know what? I completely agree with you. Watching Jets games this year, the Scheifele Connor combo often reminds me of the Western Conference version of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier in the Eastern Conference for the Devils. Like, they are great individual players that just, for some reason, there's no reason they don't work that well together, but they work great individually, and that's where they thrive. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think one of the other guys that I've sort of circled for this particular playoff run, and a player who I'm really hoping kind of steps up his game a bit, it's got to be Sean Monahan. I know that Monahan was, if you look on the counting stats and stuff, he's been very good, and I think he's the kind of player who's a better complementary piece than he is, a driver. But for him, I think having that extra level of 5v5 play, really driving results, pushing forward, could honestly help the Jets a lot. I think he's been nice, and especially on the power play, but in terms of that next even strength level, it might be sort of in that Casey Mittelstadt where he's doing a lot of the small stuff and he's also scoring loads. But in terms of like just driving those shifts, I haven't seen it from him yet. I think Tyler Toffoli's probably been a little more noticeable there, but I'm still waiting for Sean to really hit maybe another tier. And it's weird to complain about because he was only a first round pick and he's been great. Like, I really have no complaints, but for what it's gonna take to go against a team like Colorado that's been there, that has a championship title, you're going to have your A game. And I think that's where I sort of wonder which version of the Jets really do show up.
Yeah, that separation of who can start a play and get it going. Like, we know you can finish the play, but who's going to get it going, especially against a high caliber playoff opponent? I completely agree with you there, and I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, this series for me comes down to one player in particular. You mentioned him earlier. It's got to be Connor Hellebuyck because, Georgiev and Annunen, bless their hearts, they try. But in terms of the goaltending matchup, where you guys have McKinnon up front and arguably, Makar when he's feeling it, the Jets have the guy in net. I just feel like I slighted Josh Morrissey there slightly. I feel like I slightly disrespected him. He's been like one of our best skaters, but in terms of guys that, I would basically, if I had a firstborn and they were in a tornado or something, there's one man that I would trust to keep them safe. It's probably Connor Hellebuyck. But yeah, I think he, for me, is probably not only the biggest player for the Jets, but maybe even Winnipeg's biggest storyline. Now, playoff Connor Hellebuyck hasn't always been up to par. There's been games where he's been a little more mediocre. I'm curious to know if he's going to get solved in this postseason. He's been, pretty lights out for the regular season, but the playoffs, they can be a different animal.
It only helps Connor Hellebuyck that across the ice you have one goalie that is similar to Rick Ankiel and has the yips, and then you have one goalie who has no playoff experience at all. So you have one, Georgiev is kind of regressing and honestly having problems tracking the puck, and then you have kind of, I wouldn't say he's the hot goalie right now, but he's serviceable. And that's not enough in the playoffs, especially against an all-world goalie in Connor Hellebuyck. So it makes his task a little bit easier, and the struggles on the other side make your struggles seem a little bit less.
Yeah, and I think obviously the goaltending might even be considered perhaps one of the biggest X factors. Maybe something that folks are going to factor into their major predictions, which actually is one of our next ports of call. In just a moment, we're going to dive into some of the perhaps major stats, or perhaps X factors in stats, or even some storylines that people have sort of overlooked. All coming right up in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Monopoly Go. Of course, when it comes to being competitive, we all probably yell at each other when we're playing games. I know I get competitive in FIFA. I probably call my opponents not very nice things once in a while, but it is what it is, right? Kyle, I don't know if you're a particularly competitive player. I don't know if you get into that mode. We all know that we can.
Oh yeah, I'm an avid gamer and I love Monopoly Go. It is big in the Von Doom household.
See, and when you're competing against friends and family, this is a great game. It's easy to learn. And of course, it is a timeless classic, but Monopoly Go takes it to another level. It's been downloaded over 150 million times and puts Monopoly boards in crazy locations where you can build up amazing cities that bring you big money. There's also a few extra twists, though. You can charge your friends rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. But if that's not enough for you, you can also raid their vaults for riches, because who doesn't love a little bit of crime? The leaderboards are going to show who amongst your friends are the top Monopoly Go players and reveal the top Monopoly Tycoon. But of course, if you actually want to just play with your friends and not make them hate you, you can do that as well, because they also have great time tournaments that help you earn huge rewards. Get in the game and join your friends right now, because you can download Monopoly Go for free on the App Store or Google Play. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's crossover episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Avs. We have spent quite a bit of time talking about some major storylines around the Jets and Avs and some major players. But now it's time to the final draw. What should Jets and Avs fans know about some of the X factors and perhaps some sneakily underrated storylines? Kyle, what do you think hasn't really been addressed in all of this, right? Is it a power play? Is it a secret player? What could be the turning point that no one is paying attention to?
It's easy to talk about the offense for the Avs, the defense, and the goaltending for the Jets. But where this series comes down to is going to be special teams. The Avalanche have a potent power play, and their penalty kill is getting hotter. And I know it's not the strongest point for Winnipeg, and as long as they can stay out of the box, either team, I think that is where this series is going to lie, is special teams is going to decide this entire series.
You just happen to talk about my old nemesis, the Jets PK. Probably one of the worst parts of this team. Winnipeg special teams, well, let's just say the power play is not exactly great. Recently, it's been connecting more frequently thanks to Gabriel Velarde not being injured anymore. Brother was made of glass for a while. I'm just glad that he has an NHL career. I thought he would never get the chance. But I got to say, it's both heartening and incredibly dispiriting that anytime he joins the power play, it actually looks functional again, because you always worry as soon as he leaves, it's not so great. But, the Avs power play, I always freak out every time I see it. I'm like, wow, these guys move the puck so quickly, and it is a nightmare to contain. But against, the Jets, actually, I'd be curious to know, what is the Avs PK like? Because that's not something we've really seen all that often.
And the Avs are known for making dumb penalties. Josh Manson, I'm talking to you. And the penalty kill, it's been getting hotter since trade deadline. They're sitting at about 60%, and it's getting improved. So they can kill penalties. And with the absence of Logan O'Connor, who's out for the season he's getting a surgery, he's out. He had 3 shorthanded goals. Like, that was almost spectacle television. You were looking forward to the penalty kill because Logan O'Connor used to turn that into points. And you don't have that luxury anymore. But the Avalanche they're deceptively good on the penalty kill.
I wish I could say that about the Jets. The only thing I can say that's deceptive about it is the fact that they kill penalties, because you would not know it from watching them play. I guess for other X factors, I think, goaltending we've already talked about. One thing that I'm curious to know is, who do you think wins the depth battle? Because the Jets have a really strong bottom six. It doesn't score loads, but it consistently shuts down opponents. Do you foresee that being a challenge for the Avs, or do you think the Avs have the depth to kind of work around that?
See, it's depending on which version of the Avalanche you get. Because if that top line isn't working, the rest of the team doesn't work. But if that top line works, it's going to be a tall task for the Winnipeg Jets, because you have these lines take on new identities every night. And you can have line 3 looking as good as the top line. And you're talking about Joel Kiviranta on line 4. Like, that's the kind of quality you have when it comes to depth. So as long as that top line is rolling, the rest of the team will be constantly clicking. But it's who can get out there and score first and really get the momentum going. That's where it's really going to. Because Winnipeg kind of reminds me of like Vegas last year with their depth scoring and that constant rolling thunder. It's punches for the Avalanche, where the Jets are just constant rolling pressure and thunder.
That's when they decide to show up. Sometimes it's been a little bit of a sketchy situation, but factoring that sort of heavy pressure versus rapid jabs, you've got 2 heavyweights in a masterful bout. Who do you think emerges? Give me your series prediction.
I have this terrible feeling that it's not going to be beneficial to either team, but it's going to go 7. And I want to say Colorado, but honestly, it's a coin flip.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like this series is going to exhaust whoever comes out of it, and then you're going to get the winner of Dallas or Vegas, and that's not going to be good, which I feel like could be a quicker series. So it's honestly try and get out healthy and get out quick in this series, but the way these 2 teams are constructed, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I think I've got the Jets in 6, and that's probably as soon as I would say. I would not be surprised at all if it goes the full 7. But of course, there's only one way to find out. It starts this Sunday at, I think, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central Time. Should be a great series. But Kyle, thank you so much for joining. Where can folks find and listen to you and Chris on your podcast?
You can find the show on Twitter X at LOPN_Avalanche. You can search Locked On Avalanche on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube. You can find us there, and it'll direct you to our YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
Excellent. And of course, you can follow us at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter/X as well. We are also on all of these same platforms, so be sure to find us if you actually like Jets hockey or even just want to know a little bit of the enemy's perspective. But Thank you all so much for joining us on tonight's episode. That is all the time that we have. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week.